Scraps and more scraps. What do we do with this? Do we just toss it in the bin? Or should we attempt to make something nice for our journals? Hello everyone, it's Dragana from Saacibo. Welcome and welcome back to my channel. As you can see, I'm struggling with the scraps. I've accumulated lots of these over the year. I think it's about time I do something about this. So today's video is going to be about what we can do to use up those scraps and make interesting and nice ephemera embellishments for our journals and even journals. So this is going to be not a tutorial because I won't be making anything. This is more like a junk journal inspiration, and I want to share with you what I like to do with my scraps. So stay tuned. I should say number one for me is definitely Masterboards. With Masterboards, you use up your scraps the fastest because you have a bigger surface and you go through your pieces much quicker than with some other smaller things. And you can basically use any size piece, smaller pieces, larger pieces, longer pieces, just text, just plain. And it's up to you how you organize and arrange your Masterboards depending on what you want to do with them afterwards. And if they turn out really nice, you can always take a photo or scan them and print them and use as pages in your journals. That's what I do sometimes as well. And here are some examples of my Masterboards. As you can see, there's lots of little bits and pieces, plain paper, text, envelopes, some words, some die cuts, images, and here as well a lot of different pieces, and in a way Masterboards are like collages, but I'll talk in a second what's the biggest difference between a Masterboard and a collage, although it does seem to be the same thing, but it's not really. Here's one with just papers, dyed papers. This one just with the white bits from old book pages. Now, some people might say, but what do you do with them? So what I like to do, and what I used to do in the past, is make journal covers. So I would cut it up into smaller sections, use one section for the front, one for the back, and that would be a journal. And I have a few here that I've started last year and I didn't complete, but I have them sorted out. Okay, eventually I'll get to it. You see, they are Masterboards that were cut out to be junk journals. So there's one that was meant to be for this Christmas. I forgot about it. And these are just some of my older Masterboards. Okay, so you can make journal covers, and I have one finished journal here that was done with a Masterboard. So that was a Masterboard. All right, I cut it up so that I can make a journal cover with it. Okay, so that is a great way to use your Masterboard. You create unique journal covers. Another thing, this one last year, again, it was a Masterboard that I cut into, there was a few more, but I don't have them anymore. And I cut them into a card shape, decorated further, and I stamped the back, turned them into postcards. Okay, so index cards, postcards, anything like that is great use for your Masterboards, and then you decorate your journals with them. I have another example here. This was also a Masterboard. I cut it up into tags. Another thing, whatever you do with your paper scraps, you can certainly do the same thing with your fabric scraps. And I have an example here. This was a fabric Masterboard, and I cut it out into the shape of a heart, and then this one as well, and the smaller pieces I decorated further and created those little charms. So that's an example of a fabric Masterboard. These are some of the offcuts from my Masterboards that I plan to turn into tags, cards, postcards, index cards, bookmarks. They need a little bit more work, perhaps something on the back, some stitching, and they're ready to go. I especially like these ones with just text. And as you can see, they're all made from scraps. I think I've done this last year about the same time in January, created quite a few masterboards and I was thrilled with it. Alright, so I said I'm gonna explain the difference between masterboards and collages. Okay, have a look. These are collages. They're also made with bits and pieces of different things. These are like mixed media collages. They also like have fabric and other things. But this is a collage. Collage is like a finished work. Doesn't matter what size it is, but it's got a focal image. All right. So it is like a masterboard, but it's more in itself as a piece of art or finished piece of art. Well, on the other hand, masterboards are kind of half finished. So they're great background, but they still need a little something depending on how you use them. You either have to cut them up a certain way, for example, like here, so that you have that as a focal image, or that there, or you have to add something on top and use that masterboard as a background. Okay, I just want to show you this. This here is an example of a collage, and it's done with so many little pieces, almost like a masterboard, but it has something that is actually making it a collage or a finished piece of artwork with little pieces but put together in a way that it's like a finished work. And a lot of the time when we decorate our journals and we work on our art journals, we basically do collage, and masterboard is just a collage that is kind of half finished. That's how I see it. Perhaps you might not agree with me, but that is my take on it, and I absolutely love making masterboards. Another one of my favorites is making snippets or little collage strips, whatever you like to call them. I've done a video on this, and this actually helps you to go through your scraps really quickly, and you can create different themes, and they're great to use in journals. You can use them as belly bands, as side pockets, as just page decorations. I mean, possibilities here are endless. You can create any look you like depending on what sort of scraps you have, and it's really a lot of fun. You can add sewing on top, but you don't have to. You can just glue things and that would be all right. And yeah, I really enjoy making those snippets. Let me just give you an example in a journal. Okay, here is one of these that I've included in this journal. Doesn't it look really nice? And I turned it into a belly band, and most of my journals will have at least one of these inside. There's one in here. Because I have that yellow page, I've used a snippet that had a bit of yellow and to tie it up with that yellow. So although they are mixture of whatever, you can still make them in certain way that it's not too much or too busy. Choose your scraps so that they match or go together, if you know what I mean. All right. Another popular way of using your scraps, especially if you have thin papers or if you have longer strips of papers, is to make paper ruffles. Something like this. And you use your sewing machine to create them. I've done these ages ago and they're not that nice or pretty, but I just had them and I wanted to show you what is a paper ruffle, although these are not very nice examples. But I have also an example here, which is just a thin paper that's been pleated like that, like a ruffle, and glued behind this, and I think it gives a nice effect. Then I went ahead and I created one quickly, just so that I can show you what you can actually do. So I had these strips of papers, leftover strips of papers. I used my sewing machine to create it, and then I decorated with little bits and pieces that I had, some bling and some die cut shapes of butterflies and flowers. So the idea with paper ruffles is that you cut a section and you use in your journal. For example, I want to use that there, either at the bottom or at top, so I would cut here and I glue that, and it's a decoration. And you can do this, roll them up and have them really long, and a lot of them, and just roll them up and keep them like that until you are ready to use them. Another one of my favorites is making paper flowers. How fun is that? And you can also use fabric scraps and buttons and whatever else you have. I think that is probably what I enjoy making most. It's really, really easy, and it's great to have them on hand when you want to decorate your journal. Look at that one. I think that paper flower is just perfect there. Here is one example where I used that paper flower to decorate this tag, and this was with very thin paper. Butterflies. Who doesn't like butterflies? Make some butterflies, some layered butterflies or flat butterflies. I think these are really great decorations in journals. A lot of us just love butterflies. I don't know why. There's just something about these creatures that they're so beautiful. And I use a lot of them in my journals. Some of these were cut. These smaller ones were cut with die cuts on scissors, but those larger ones I cut with just scissors. And I also have a tutorial on that, and there's a free template if you'd like to download it from my website and make these. And as you can see, these are just from paper scraps, book pages, whatever I had. And also this is a scrap piece of wax thread. You know, after you finish your journal, when you bind it, you always have to cut off the excess thread, and I think that wax thread is great for this because it holds its shape. I just want to give you a few examples like that one there. One more example. It really adds to the whole page. That's the idea number 5, butterflies. Idea number 6, if you have scissors or if you have punches, you can cut out small shapes that you can use later on to decorate your snippets or to make even charms or other elements. Okay, this is how I store them. Look at these. They're like little buttons, paper buttons. Then what do we have here? Little picture frames. So they're all cut from the scraps. Some of these, and on and on. What do we have in here? Here we have some butterflies. More butterflies. Can never have enough butterflies. Okay, leaves, small leaves. Look at those. Okay, so you can do all of these things with your little pieces that were left, and you can cut a few at the same time if you have scissors. If you have a punch, you can also do that, like circles and squares and little hearts and things like that. And then later on you can use them to make charms and dangles, and these as well. I think I went through a stage when I was just cutting these postage stamps. I was gonna make some faux postage stamps, but I never got around doing it. And then these, you know, a lot of things, and even circles, you know, you can make a lot of these, and I'll just show you what I like to make with those. You've probably seen one of my how to make charms from recycled materials videos. That is basically it. You cut out these little shapes and you just make little clusters like that. Or if you cut a few cardstock shapes first and you glue them together and you add those little pictures that you have, you can make those charms. Add some words, things like that. What do I have in here? Yeah, also this image of a butterfly and a bird and another butterfly, and this was just with the round punch, 1-inch round punch, just several layers glued together. This is with one of those dies in the shape of a little tag. Again, another one of those. And yeah, so you use all your little scraps to create something nice and fun. Look at that, the tiny little flower there. I love it. So that's what I like to do when I don't feel inspired to do anything else. You know, you just get your scraps and get your scissors or punches and just cut shapes and make charms. Another thing you can do with those little bits and pieces that you cut with your scissors perhaps or by hand is to create texture. And I have my nautical journal here, and I just wanted to show you that all these little bits and pieces were cut from leftover pieces and then painted over to create this texture or 3D look. So that is one way of using them. Even if they don't go well together or they're color that you don't like, you can cut them up and glue them down and then paint over them and still use them like that to create beautiful textures. Another really nice way of using up those thin strips of paper that you might have in your scraps is to weave the paper, do the crisscross thing, and then you cut it into shapes or use it for journal cover or whatever you want to do. I've used here some blue and some green papers to make almost like a masterboard with just those paper strips, and then I use my scissors to cut the heart shapes, and I've glued this one here to be as a pocket, and I think it's lovely. So that's a beautiful way to use up those paper strips, I think, and I'm sure you can come up with a lot of different results depending on what sort of strips you use. They can be all in different color, all in different patterns. I only used the greens and the blues that were dyed paper, so there's a bit of variation, but it's totally up to you. You can also paint on top of these, use your stencils, use your stamps, turn them even into little charms. That is one way of using your thin paper strips. I have another example of using those thinner strips of paper that you just don't know what to do with. You can make those little frames. I've done this in one of the videos on recycling packaging, but you can do exactly the same with your paper offcuts. Okay? You make those little frames, then you put something in the frame, for example, this butterfly. You glue it in the page, you can stamp in the middle, you can draw something in the middle, you can write things in the middle. And I've used sewing on these, but you don't have to. You can also turn them into specimen cards like I've done here. Okay, so they're also strips, leftover strips from when I was painting the packaging, recycled packaging. So you can make specimens with those strips. And I have one more really nice project for paper strips, and that is to make Christmas trees. You just glue the strips, all different ones, and then you cut it into the shape of a Christmas tree. But you don't have to cut it in the shape of a Christmas tree. You can cut it in any shape you like, into a shape of a heart, or butterfly, a house, or anything that comes to your mind. It's basically a masterboard with strips of paper that you cut out in whatever shape you like. So that's one way of using those strips as well. So far, 5 different things that you see here were made with paper strips, and this is the scrap that we have most of. You know, Ruffles, masterboard with strips that you cut into shapes, weaving paper, little picture frames, and specimens. How cool is that? And these were all actually made from scraps. And now we come to this. This is what actually prompted this video. I was working on a journal, then I was going through my box of scraps to find something, and I saw all these eco-dyed paper pieces, and I thought, oh, what a shame, what am I going to do with those? Those papers fell apart when I was dyeing them, and then I had some other ones that were just leftover pieces, and I saw my markers there and I started just sketching and doodling on them. I got so into it that I completely forgot to work on my journal, and I put up a post in my Facebook group and my Facebook page, and I asked people, what do you like to do with your paper scraps? And it was really an amazing response. And this must be something that a lot of us love to do. I don't know how to explain, but when you make something from nothing, from something that was destined to go into the bin, it gives you this kind of satisfaction that you've done something good. And I guess I'm addicted to that feeling. I suspect it must be for a lot of people the same. So I've started with this, but then I realized that most of the work that I do when it comes to junk journals is actually working with scraps. And just to have this video to go back to when we don't feel inspired, we'll just go through all the things that we can make with scraps, and perhaps that will get us going. Okay, so if you like drawing and doodling, this is actually a really great way, I think, to use up those scraps. And after I've done that, I've created a little masterboard. How was it? I think it was like this. And then I used some of those drawings as focal images, so they ended up being little collages that I plan to use in a journal. So this can be an index card or a postcard. And I've gone one step further, and I actually embossed them in the embossing folder before I glue this, just to make them a little bit more pressed kind of thing. When you do your masterboards and your collages, sometimes things get unglued, and just to make sure it stays flat and glued properly, I put it in the embossing folder and through my Sizzix. And I think I'm going to do that more often, although now it will be a little bit more difficult to write on the back. But it can also be just a picture to look at. All right. And one of the suggestions from my followers was to stamp, and I totally agree. I usually just stamp on these scraps, whether it's paper or fabric. Only this time I decided I wanted to draw. But if you decide to stamp instead of draw, nothing wrong with that. You can stamp, for example, words or phrases, whatever you have, and then you cut out pieces and glue in your journals. And this is great because you use those awkward shapes, and especially if it's like this, it's kind of thick, it's cardstock, so it's perfect for little labels and things like that. Okay, here as well. You can then use them in your snippets or your collages and things like that. So that's with the words. And then I've done some here as well. I could use that to decorate a page. For example, I have this plain page here. I can use that to either make a belly band or to make a side pocket or a tuck spot, or if I cut it in half, I can use one half there and the other half somewhere else. Then I've done some stamping on those smaller pieces. That's not it. This as well, it can be used in a collage. These pieces don't have to be even cut. Like these were already cut with die cuts and then I stamped on them, but you don't have to. I just stamped some tickets on this, some script on that, some clocks. And then also, if you have Sizzix and you can do die cuts, perhaps you have some embossing folders, then you can use those scraps in the embossing folders to have more collage papers like this. I really like them. So that is also a suggestion, and I think great way to use your scraps. Stamp on them, and then when you decorate a journal, just go through and pick little bits and pieces. Another thing I like to do with those little scraps is to decorate those recycled envelopes or junk mail envelopes, or envelopes that I receive my bills in. I would usually dye them with dye, and then whatever the writing was there, if I didn't like it, I would cover it with pieces of papers that I had. For example, here I just covered with that green, and that's a little pocket, and I can glue that inside of the page. Then here also covered that, added a little flower. And over here again put some book page, some handmade paper, and this, and it even has a pocket on this side, so I guess it can be clipped onto a page. So again, here I covered this side with some little bits and pieces, and there's a pocket here. And it's really so much fun, and you can make a lot of these, and then when you have journals ready, it's so easy to decorate when you have those bits and pieces done. Here's another example. This was also one of those envelopes, but it was just done a little bit different. As you can see, there's the window here. I folded it in half and I created 2 flaps. So it's meant to go inside of the journal, like to be bound like this. And again, these are all little pieces of paper that were left from previous projects, and then I just added these leaves to make it more interesting. The same on the inside. It's just pieces of papers left from other projects. Okay, so that is another idea what you can do with your little scraps of papers. For example, if you're working on a journal that's not the standard size, meaning that it doesn't use up full page, whether it's A4 or letter size, probably you'll have lots of wider strips of paper left. And I always kept those strips, and I used to love making those little notepads. Okay, and they're great to include in a journal, especially if I use these papers in that journal, and then I make a little like a notepad to go inside. I think that's a great addition here as well. And they don't all have to be the same size. This one as well. I use this stapler here. And I even made a little closure. Yeah, so that's what you do with those paper strips that are a little bit wider, especially if it's a just plain paper. I think I have one here as well. Another thing you can make is one of those tags, and I love making those layered tags with lots of pieces, and it's even great for smaller pieces like this. I just love making those, and I love if I can put a few different papers there, meaning thicker paper, thinner paper, vellum, printer paper, book pages, whatever I have. And it's great because they don't have to be cut straight. You can also include fabric like here, and they look really good in journals, and I really love making those. Then if you're really good with making small things, you can make those tiny little books that can be like charms, like this here. And please don't laugh. I attempted to make these, but I don't know if I have the patience to make more. I watched Natasha from Treasure Books a tutorial a few years ago, and I attempted to make these little books. But that's just the idea of what you can make with those little pieces of paper. I have here a few of those hidden paper clips, and they are also great to use with little pieces of paper that are left from other projects. You can decorate them further. These are quite plain, but these are the only ones I had. Didn't have time to make more. So those smaller pieces of paper are great to make paper clips, especially if it's a thicker paper like scrapbooking paper or lighter cardstock. I wouldn't make them with really thin copy paper, but you can if you glue onto something that is thicker. Another great way to use those tiny bits of scraps is to make some embellishments or clusters. What I have here are some that were made with paper and fabric. Okay, so I usually put the paper piece on the back so that it's easier to glue inside of the journal, and then I use some fabric scraps. And by the way, most of these ideas that I've shown you are not just for paper. They can be applied to fabric scraps as well, most of them. The only thing I don't think it would work with fabric is to make specimens because obviously fabric is not sturdy enough to hold a laminated specimen. These were made just with paper offcuts, and I used sewing machine, and I really love these. They look really good in a journal. And as you can see, I used those tiny die cuts here of a button, a butterfly. This was a piece left that had that number, and yeah, that's just really great way to decorate a journal. Let's have a look. For example, if I want to decorate this page here, I can just glue that there, or even just glue it top and bottom and use it as a tuck spot. I can use a smaller piece and just have it there. Doesn't it look pretty? And these were really just paper scraps. Even that almost looks like an abstract piece of art. The same goes with these if you want more like a shabby look. Yeah, so I think those embellishments or clusters, or whatever you want to call them, I think they're a great way to use those tiniest pieces of paper. And then I have some here that were more like small collages. These were put together with die cut shapes. Okay, and they look really cool. I think I've done this probably 3 or 4 years ago, and I still have them. I haven't used them in any of the journals. I don't know why, I just found them today. And then I have these from when I was making those specimens with kitchen towel rolls, and I had those squares left, and then I just made like a little collage on top. And this was all stamped images on scrap piece of paper that I fussy cut and then glued like that to make like a little collage. That's all done with small pieces, so no need to throw away your small pieces. And after all of this that I've shown you, you're still left with pieces like this that are just white and thin strips. You know, I suppose you can weave and make textures and all of that, but it will take forever to use up, and I have a full bag of them. I guess I was saving them to make handmade paper, and that is my absolute last resort. I love handmade paper, but it is a lot of work. Once you go through all your scraps and you make everything you can from them, there's always some pieces left that you just can't use for anything, and you just put them in a bag until you have enough, and then you make yourself some handmade paper, so you never have to waste anything ever again. I only have a few left because it's been a while since I made those. As you can see, I added some flowers and grasses and seeds inside, but they are also from recycled paper. Oh, I put a napkin on the back of that one. And then with these ones I used, actually with the paper I used some flower petals after eco dyeing. I had a lot of rose petals left, so I just added them into the mixture, and I ended up with this lovely paper. That's why it's different color and it's brown. So that is the last resort, I think, because it's not easy to make handmade paper. I always get sore back afterwards, but they are great for those pieces that you just can't use anywhere else. Okay, so that is how I like to use my scraps. And yeah, there's probably other ways and more ideas out there, but I've tried to cover everything that I could think of at the moment. And if you think of something else, please leave it in the comments for everyone to look at and share in our Facebook group if you don't mind. It is called Crafting with Saacibo. And for most of these things that I've shown you, I have tutorials. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you find lots of inspiration, especially if you don't feel so motivated. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I see you soon in my next video. Bye for now.